I work with the Kavira Coalition. We are a nonprofit based in Ogopoge or Santa Fe, New Mexico. Through education, innovation, and collaboration, we work in coalition with producers, agencies, and stewards to foster resilience on working lands. We do workshops, webinars like this. We have a conference in November, and this year will be in Denver. Please reach out to me for more info on that. We have an apprenticeship program that takes place mostly on ranches, but also farms. And we do research on carbon sequestration in the soil. And yeah, we do a lot, and I'm excited to always meet people. So please connect with me if you want to learn more.
Hi, everyone.
All right, Christine.
Yes, I'm Christine Rost. I'm a research associate with the Soil Carbon Solutions Center. And I also recently graduated with my master's in greenhouse gas management and sustainable food systems. And I'm super excited to be here. CSU Soil Carbon Solutions Center was founded in 2022 and leverages world-class expertise to build the tools needed to accelerate the deployment of credible soil-based climate solutions, measure their impact, and also bring them to scale. The center has over 50 active members, and our team is rapidly growing. And before we introduce our presenters, it's important to us to acknowledge that carbon markets may not be accessible or feasible for everyone. But in this webinar, we'll explore some creative alternatives and discuss emerging opportunities, equity, and access as well. And this webinar will be around 90 minutes and will include a 5-minute break in between our presenters. We will follow up the presenters with a 25-minute Q&A, and I'll be looking over the chat to combine like-minded questions and share those with our presenters to answer.
Christine, I can go into the Mentimeter now too.
Great. Yeah.
So to give our speakers a sense of who all is in the room, I'm going to copy a link into the chat, and that link will take you to this question. And we just want to know your affiliations. I think I said it so you can select multiple at the same time. We would like to know who you are and who you're representing. Are you in the carbon market industry or similar? Are you a producer yourself? Do you serve producers through your organization or agency? Are you in academics or research, or are you this other unicorn? And yeah, so that's just really helpful. So we'll give you a second to, well, more than 1 second. We'll give you like, let's say 30 seconds to answer this question. And then that'll just help us know who's here. Wonderful. So it looks like we have a lot of folks serving producers through their organization or agency, which is the realm I work in too. So that connects. All right. I will go back to the slideshow now. You're welcome to keep answering that. I'm going to go back to here. And we're going to just say welcome to our speakers, Doug Adams and Bryan Van Stippen. We'll start with Bryan, who's the program director at the National Indian Carbon Coalition. Then we'll take a little break. And then we'll hear from Doug Adams, who is the manager of member engagement and equity at Ecosystem Services Market Research Consortium. Bryan, if you are ready, we have your beautiful rice photo here.
Seguliako, I greet you and I thank you for allowing me to be at this webinar today. So thank you very much to the Kavira Coalition and the Colorado State University for inviting the National Indian Carbon Coalition to be a participant and discuss these important issues on agricultural lands, not only in Indian country, but throughout the nation. So again, my name is Bryan Van Stippen. I am the program director for the National Indian Carbon Coalition. We are a tribally owned and operated, not-for-profit organization that was created by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, as well as the Intertribal Agriculture Council. So ILTF and IAC came together in approximately 2003 to develop the National Indian Carbon Coalition because there was a lot of interest in forest-based carbon projects in Indian country. A lot of developers were out there trying to get tribal nations to participate in different types of marketplaces and enroll their lands into carbon sequestration projects. I began in 2017 at the National Need Carbon Coalition. And again, a lot of the focus has been on forest-based projects. That's just where the industry has been over the last 10, 15 years or so, trying to get more lands enrolled into improved forest management projects, as well as reforestation projects. And now, within the last few years, with a lot of discussion around regenerative agriculture, we're starting to see a push through multiple different organizations, including ESMC, on trying to get more, not only tribal nation farm producers, but individual tribal member producers to participate in this marketplace. So there's been new programs that are starting to come online. A few years ago, we did receive a USDA grant to start to promote different type of practices, basically no-till and cover cropping, to our members that we were able to engage with. And then once they were able to install those types of practices onto their land base, they were eligible to enter into a carbon market. So the photo that you see is a wild rice bed because we don't have a ton of agricultural projects going in our situation yet. Currently, we've been focusing a lot with row crop producers or cash crop producers, whatever it may be, corn, sorghum, soybean, starting to get into potato. Hemp is starting to be a lot of questions around hemp production and the ability to participate with growing that crop and entering into the carbon market. So we try to explore whatever type of product that producer is generating and get it to participate into this marketplace by implementing these sustainable management practices. One of the other pilots that we are working on is on grazing in pasture lands. So rotational grazing is starting to become more popular. If you're going to be implementing rotational grazing practices, then that makes that land base eligible for the carbon markets. At the beginning, we understand that this is not going to fit every producer or landowner's needs. And before we get your hopes up way too high, these are not huge revenue generators. I mean, there is dollars that can be made, but if we're going to start looking at carbon market production on agricultural land compared to forest-based projects where we start to see millions and millions of dollars, that's just not going to be viable in the agricultural marketplace at this point in time. We're looking at seeing this expansion into agricultural lands. Last year at COP29, there was a lot of discussion around getting more agricultural lands involved in the carbon marketplace. So again, in the last, what we've seen 12 to 24 months, a bigger push to engage with producers that are working on the ground, trying to implement these management practices, and then hopefully letting them a return on their investment for including that no-till cover cropping. So in the last few years at the National Need Carbon Coalition, we did engage with a couple tribal nations, the Lower Brule Sioux tribal community in South Dakota. In that project, we were doing an avoided conversion of grassland to cropland. Lower Brule had done a lot of growing of popcorn, and we're contracting that out to different corporate partners. But then we started to see that their topsoil was starting to be depleted and dilapidated. They just weren't able to keep the topsoil there on the ground because of the wind in South Dakota. They're starting to see a lot of it being blown away. And then the nutrients in the ground was just not going to be sustainable for the crop that they were trying to grow. So we started converting it back into native habitat, which started to work out pretty well, including the planting of more tubers into the ground to introduce more nitrogen into that land base. And then we would just grind it up at the end of the day, get it back into the ground. The tribe itself had started to see a lot of wildlife leave the area, or at least not have as much wildlife because there was no more food sources. So again, putting some of those tubers back in the ground, they started to see their white-tailed deer, other animals that they had seen frequently on their reservation lands return. But it was a small pilot project, and it takes a lot of work to get that done. Unfortunately, our USDA grant had run out of funds and time, but we were able to successfully show with the data that it could be viable. We just didn't have the scale to get that completed. We also worked with the Santa Ana Pueblo in New Mexico on that project, we were doing a compost addition to grazing lands. The really cool thing with that project is if you go and look at the Santa Ana Reservation on Google Earth, you can see the 3 1-acre test sites we did compared to the surrounding area by adding this compost onto their lands. The, again, unfortunate part as a pilot project is that the tribe itself wanted to create the compost and they just didn't have enough material. So we had to acquire and purchase compost, which is not economically viable for the project itself. But we wanted to ensure that this could actually be beneficial to the land base. So we went ahead and found some funding to acquire some of the compost from the city of Albuquerque. We placed it onto these 3 1-acre test sites up to a 1/2 inch. And after a month or so, you could see again from Google Earth that our test sites were getting revitalized much more quickly than the rest of the grazing lands around their area. So those were 2 of the protocols that we had been promoting at the National Need Carbon Coalition, and then got sidetracked way back during the pandemic. We had started talking to Cuvera Coalition about these opportunities back in 2020, and then pandemic hit and everything went sideways. And now we are finally on our way back to trying to incorporate more engagement with producers, tribal producers, underserved producers, to work and assist on their land base. There are funding sources out there to help get some of these practices in place. It's one of the things that we at the National Need Carbon Coalition are striving for strongly here. We want to bring on an individual to work specifically on soil-based programs, not only on row crop and grazing and pasture land, but grasslands as well. So we do have a couple tribal nations that we were engaging with that are looking at grassland type-based projects. And that might be more opportunities to determine whether or not those land bases could then be enrolled into a carbon marketplace. So what we're again trying to do at the National Need Carbon Coalition is to engage with whatever type of producer, whether you be a farmer, a rancher, doing those row crops or just doing ranching lands, or a tribal nation producer. We would engage and work with you to try to determine what make the most sense for your land base. I do see on the participant list that there are some members from Intertribal Agricultural Council here. The National Need Carbon Coalition, as I mentioned, was created by IAC as well. And so we are trying to develop some of the programming with their technical advisors that are doing a lot of the outreach to the producers through a Climate Smart Commodities grant to talk more about the participation in carbon markets. So if you have a relationship, or if you're looking for a relationship with your local technical advisor from the Intertribal Agricultural Council, go to their website, check them out, make contacts, because right now we are in the process of looking for more participants to enroll into these programs and help in any way that we can. So again, this is brand new to a lot of us, including the National Need Carbon Coalition, but there is a big focus into the agricultural industry to get more of these lands into the programming. And we're starting to see federal dollars, philanthropic dollars being expended into these areas. And so there is some strong opportunities. And we would just want to recommend checking out any sort of options, opportunities. We again work closely with NRCS on a lot of these things, and our understanding that they're not necessarily providing all of the services that some of the producers, you guys on the ground, are needing. And that's where organizations like the National Need Carbon Coalition, Intertribal Agriculture Council, as well as Doug and his entity at ESMC, we are on the precipice here of getting these programs up off the ground and trying to find more participants that want to do these types of good works so that we can address climate change, derive additional revenue for your land bases, create additional revenue streams through carbon market opportunities. So that's my short story at the National Need Carbon Coalition, the direction that we are going in, how we're trying to engage with tribal and underserved producers and developing these partnerships again with organizations like ESMC to promote their programs, to promote their services out into the world, so that individuals, entities like yourselves can be a participant into these marketplaces and get assistance as needed, because it's a heavy lift. This isn't something that's just going to happen overnight. It takes time, it takes dedication, and we all know that as producers out there, you guys are busy enough just trying to make it work with the workload that you currently have. So we're very cognizant of the concerns and issues, especially concerns around the carbon marketplace. But again, that's what one of the roles that we play at the National Indian Carbon Coalition is, just helping guide you through that process to determine whether or not these are right for your lands. And again, they're not going to be right for everybody, but we're hopeful that after doing interviews and webinars like this, that the word gets out and more people start to participate, start to explore these opportunities, because again, there is funding out there from different organizations and entities, as well as revenue streams that can come on the back end if these lands are enrolled into the carbon marketplace. So, short story, just wanted to give a brief background on the National Indian Carbon Coalition before I turn it over to Doug and his presentation. He's going to get way more into the weeds on the technical end, what the programs are about, how this all is going to actually work for your land base. And so I think it's important that Doug has a little bit more time for his presentation, because he's going to get really deep in the weeds to show how these services and programs that ESMC has built can help benefit your land base. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Leah.
Thanks, Bryan. Well, you saved us some time. We're early, so it feels funny to have a break now since we're only 20 minutes in, but I know that we're gonna need just a couple minutes to pull up your slideshow. So this could be a minute for you all to grab a cup of water or tea or something like that while Doug gets his screen up and shared. And also, yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat. We will address them after Doug's presentation for both speakers. So looks good, Doug. I think we're good to go.
All right. Do we want to give folks a couple minutes, or you want me to dive in now?
We can just dive in since we're ahead of schedule, and we can always see if there's a natural place for a break later.
All right, sounds good. All right, everyone. Well, thank you all thank you, Christine and Leah, for this opportunity. Thank you, Colorado State University and Kivera Coalition for hosting this conference and allowing ESMC to be a part of it. My name is Doug Adams. I am ESMC's Manager of Membership Engagement and Equity. Just going to go ahead and get started with the slideshow that you all are seeing on the screen. So titled here is Scaling Ecosystem Service Markets. Ecosystem Service Markets is actually the first 3 words in the ESMC acronym, which I'm going to break down first. ESMC is Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization, and Eco Harvest is our market program, or really you can see it as ESMC's primary business offering, if you will. All right, so gonna do a quick, let's get the slideshow going. All right, overview of the agenda. We're gonna kick it off with some introductions. I'm gonna then dive into some more detail on what ESMC is and what our Eco Harvest market program is. And then we'll close with some challenges that we've seen in my work on the equity side around challenges for that underserved producers are faced in engaging and entering ecosystem service markets. All right, so quick prompt, and feel free to respond in the chat freely. What comes to mind when you hear the term carbon market? All right, just gonna give you guys maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Any and all insights or responses are welcome in the chat. Let's warm that room up. Yes. Money or payment for carbon in the ground long term. Yes. Carbon sequestration, indeed, getting compensated for that. Healthy soils, extractive, greenwashing. Okay, I appreciate that candid response there. Conservation finance opportunities, potential opportunity for producers to be paid for their good work. That's a good one. Differentiation products, additional revenue stream for sure. Incentive for something we have been doing for hundreds of years and finally getting rewarded. That is an awesome way to, yeah, I need to go ahead and heart that myself. Thank you, Bo. Yeah, and that's just it in a nutshell. Let's see what we got here. Okay. All right, so ESMC's mission, simply stated, is to advance ecosystem service markets that incentivize farmers and ranchers to improve soil health systems that benefit society. Yeah, we have created a platform in the form of Eco Harvest Market Program that facilitates farmers and ranchers being compensated for farming practices that enhance environmental outcomes in a nutshell. All right, so taking a step back, ESMC is a member-based public-private partnership established in 2017. We're a nonprofit public-private partnership of over 70 organizations representing the ag supply chain and value chain. These are just listed out here or bullet pointed below here are some of the types of organizations and entities that comprise our membership, which this graphic encapsulates. This is an exhaustive list of all of the member organizations that are currently active members with ESMC. As you see, we have folks on the CPG side, General Mills, one of our biggest partners, McDonald's, Kimberly-Clark, alongside some universities, Cornell, Arizona State University. We have a number of producer-facing or producer-serving organizations, as well as a lot of governance bodies such as the EPA, USDA, FAR, one of our biggest funders. So the list goes on, but wanted to show you guys how expansive our membership is. They are truly the core engine that drives a lot of the work that we do here at ESMC. All right, brief history. As I mentioned, we were established in 2017 as a multi-stakeholder, out of a multi-stakeholder discussion phase. Agreement was made that carbon markets tailored to agriculture can scale soil health outcomes. And immediately in 2018, we began design of our eventual market, what became our market program, which is Eco Harvest. A bunch of due diligence work ensued. By 2019, we officially formed our public-private partnership and began developing the market program. And I'm just going to flash forward a lot of work and undertaking for the next couple of years. But in 2022, we launched Eco Harvest, which is our, as I mentioned, our platform or marketplace for buyers to financially compensate producers in their value chains for implementing climate smart practices in the way that they grow primarily row cropping systems. That scenario, I want to clarify first, is referred to as Scope 3. Those are Scope 3 emissions that come out of any ag practice where a large buyer is interfacing with producers in their value chain. We refer to that as a Scope 3 emissions. And Eco Harvest is the only Scope 3 dedicated market program or carbon market program in existence today. All right. Just a bit of more technical background about ESMC and ESMRC. So ESMC, as I mentioned, is our nonprofit public-private organization. We also operate under the umbrella a research and science-based arm called ESMRC. The R is for research. Essentially, we steward an evergreen initiatives and projects are focused on research and development and innovation. We deliver end-to-end technological and programmatic infrastructure for our project development and credit delivery. And to note, on the tech side of things, we have a tech team who has developed an MMRV platform to manage and track all of the data that is required to be managed to generate the Scope 3 credits that are produced by EcoHarvest. So that's a big accomplishment, and one that we're very proud of at ESMC, and ensures that not only is the data managed properly, but it also ensures that our quantification, verification, and tracking is all done at a high integrity and standard for governance. On that note, wanted to also share this slide here, which provides some information on our third-party governing body who validates and verifies all Scope 3 outcomes that are generated by producers in our market program. Companies called SustainCert, and they have stood up what's called a Value Change Initiative, VCI. EcoHarvest is the first carbon market program in the U.S. to reach program validation and project verification for our cropland systems under the VCI initiative. This is a milestone, not only because we're the first to do it, but it also ensures credibility for our buyers and sellers, and assurance against accusations of greenwashing, or essentially, ensuring that all credits are actually true to the data that was collected from our ag producers and has been thoroughly reviewed and verified by a third party, and not just resting on ESMC. Next slide is going to talk about a bit about our project-oriented work. In addition to operating EcoHarvest, our market program, ESMC is a project developer and partner on a number of climate-smart commodities-focused projects, or projects that exist partially due to climate-smart commodities funding, which is a big multi-billion-dollar USDA initiative. So these are a roundup of 6 of the projects that are active at the moment. As you see in the far left column, they span regions all over the country with different focuses ranging from market access, grassland livestock systems, dairy systems, producer trainings, livestock systems, and also grazing resources. Currently, EcoHarvest has a focus on soil carbon outcomes, but this year, 2024, ESMC has made expanding to other types of outcomes a priority, with grazing leading the charge. So keep an eye out for that. We currently can also facilitate water outcomes. Biodiversity is in the works, but right now our bread and butter continues to be row cropping systems and soil carbon outcomes. Third column is just some of our partners: NACD, University of Tennessee, among others. We have a bunch of objectives on the far right column: capacity building, practice development, market expansion, and plans and practices. The list goes on. All right. Now, these next couple slides are more geared towards, I saw that we have significant presence in the audience from producer-facing organizations. This is for you guys, and offer some more detail around the specifics of engagement for producers in EcoHarvest. So producers that we enroll in EcoHarvest are required to sign 5-year contracts. That's pretty standard. Important to note that any data that ESMC collects for purposes of engagement with the program remains owned by producers. A lot of our competitors, or some of our competitors at least, have been under scrutiny for mismanagement of data from producers and things like that. And we just want to stress that we are a nonprofit organization. We do things with full transparency and an emphasis on integrity and verification and validation of all data that we manage. So yeah, that's a really important point. And then finally, practice changes. Practice changes are the requirement for any producer to engage in eco-harvest. The biggest three practice changes that we focus on today are tillage reduction, nutrient management, and cover cropping. Any of these practices is not limited to one. You could apply all three, but they must be done for the first time on the field or acreage that is enrolled in the program. Meaning that if you were already applying, say, cover cropping on a given field, that field is ineligible to be enrolled, unfortunately, because it prevents us from proving additionality, which means that we don't have a place to benchmark your carbon sequestration at time of enrollment. So we have to be starting with a blank slate, if you will, a field that has been, conventionally managed over, the history, and then from there apply any of these practices. You can be paid for the same practice change over and over for up to 20 years. And yeah, we encourage producers to apply, not limit themselves to just one of these practice changes. A combination can provide for more robust outcome payments. I see, Paul, your question in the chat. What size of producer are you engaging for your program? That question, we do not have a minimum to answer that question directly, a minimum acreage for enrollment. However, the undertaking of engaging, doing the due diligence, the soil sampling, the administrative duties of entering your data, we find that it needs to make sense for whatever your farms or your producers, objectives may be in interfacing. So if you're looking at it from a financial play to generate revenue from payment of generating outcomes, if you only farming on 5 acres, that may not justify the return on investment. However, if you are farming on 5 acres and you're interested in piloting, seeing how this all works for you, you may be acquiring 100 acres next year and you want to do this as a demo. That could be a scenario where it might make sense. It all depends on the producer's goals and really resources to put toward the effort. All right, quick competitive analysis slide here. As I mentioned, ESMC is one of several carbon market programs that exist today. We, as I mentioned, focus on Scope 3 emissions or scenarios, if you will, Scope 3 types of carbon offsets. Pretty much ESMC stands alone in several of these categories strategically. Number one, we're the only nonprofit amongst our competitors that we formed as a nonprofit to ensure that any stakeholders or enrollees in eco-harvest are aware that ESMC is not seeking to earn a profit, and that kind of governs the way that we approach transparency and just really motives for operating. We're here to steward the scaling of the ecosystem service market, and pretty much we don't have any ulterior motives or shareholder interests to steward. Third-party certification for use in Scope 3, as I mentioned, ESMC was the first to do it, partnering with Sustained Cert to verify our Scope 3 outcomes that we generate. Most of our competitors have not engaged in that kind of third-party certification. Types of outcomes beyond carbon. I mentioned that soil carbon is our core outcome that we focus on, but we do have capacity to generate water outcomes, and we're working hard at doing the same for biodiversity. Producers are paid for outcomes and not just practice changes. Again, that ensures fairness in and follow through with producers implementing a practice and seeing it through to the end by measuring data at the benchmarking phase and then at the end of a season. And as far as our approach to technical assistance, we stand alone as well in that we tend to partner with local partner organizations regionally in the regions that our programs or projects operate in. We feel that that's the best approach to get hands on the ground access or boots on the ground access to the producers that we work with. list of some of our buyers, as we saw, and these are all members of ESMC, General Mills, Mars, PepsiCo, and others. These are all, some of the big corporates that have purchased Scope 3 outcomes through EcoHarvest. All right. Another question for the group. Please feel free to respond in the chat. What challenges have you experienced when engaging with carbon markets? The bullet points below are some of the things that we've heard in the past, but I want to just give 30 seconds to a minute for folks to respond in the chat to this question. Okay, Bo. Yeah, difficult and confusing onboarding process. We have heard that. Anyone else like to add anything that perhaps isn't listed here in the most common responses? And connected to a crop farmer. Okay, so we had a crop farmer whose biodiversity made a system that was too complex for the developers they were talking to. Interesting. Too many variable documentation processes. Okay. All right. Definitely got some insight from the long contracts. Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So it sounds to me that overall the process of enrollment is very problematic in a nutshell, is what I'm getting from a lot of this. It can be very tedious and puts a lot of onus on farmers and producers who are already, overall short-staffed and running tight ships. It puts a lot of onus on you guys to deal with the administrative functions of enrolling with these markets. So I'm going to get into the next few slides that kind of respond to this. One moment here. Okay. Payments to producers is next section, but I will quickly just note that ESMC, as I mentioned, we have a very strong focus on building tools to support producer success and ease in the process. ESMC currently, it's not really on the slide right now that I'm about to get into, but we are putting an emphasis in 2024 on the development of educational materials and content that can really help to clarify and remedy a lot of the questions that folks may have on the front end before they engage, which we believe will help producers lead into enrollment and engagement with more understanding and transparency. Secondly, our project team. We have a very impressive project management team here at ESMC who is invested in developing these educational, pieces of content and offerings. We recently just released a producer guide, or it's really titled the Economics of Regenerative Agriculture. This is geared towards producers and helps you get a holistic view of what to expect financially when engaging with a market program or project. And then also we have a producer guide that's currently published on our website that I encourage everyone to check out. I will drop the link in the chat after I finish the slideshow. But yeah, ESMC definitely hears a lot of these concerns, and we're definitely actively responding to them to make things easier. All right. This is the hot issue that a lot of you guys are interested in: payments to producers. So payment structure for EcoHarvest market program. So we do offer incentive payments, a one-time payment at enrollment on a per acre basis. It's typically anywhere between $10 to $20 an acre. And then following the benchmarking or the initial soil sampling at the beginning of a season, and then again at the end of a season, and following the third-party verification of data to verify how many impact units were generated over the course of a season, our impact unit payments are equal to the removals and reductions of CO2 equivalents. So our price floor is $15 per ton per acre in 2023. On average, we're seeing most producers come in at about a half ton of CO2 per acre, and payments are made annually. So every year that a practice change is enacted and maintained, impact units can be generated again over a 20-year period. So once you get the ball rolling with any given practice change, and you can make tweaks over time to your application or your implementation of cover cropping or nutrient management, and increase your earnings and the amounts of carbon that you sequester or CO2 you sequester, and in turn your earnings. Next slide. Results from ESMC projects in 2021 and 22. So looking back, we had these key learnings from the outcomes of projects in the last 2 years. You can expect a certain amount of variability in year-to-year outcomes. That's natural in the sense of agriculture and different climate variables and things like that. Cover cropping does show the most improvement as a standalone practice. As far as sequestering carbon or carbon equivalents, we're seeing cover cropping leading. But then we also encourage, again, producers to look into stacking practices together, as they tend to increase outcomes that are generated. So your best approach is to not only do cover cropping, but maybe look into cover cropping and nutrient management, or cover cropping and lower no-till. So these are just some of our findings over the past couple of years. It's not a one-size-fits-all scenario, but yes, this is what we found from our experience. And then this quick slide here is just an overview, an infographic that just takes you through the project development process. We kick things off with producer outreach and enrollment. Initially, we need data to be entered by the producer, historical data on the fields being enrolled. Again, you implement a practice. We provide or facilitate technical assistance. Soil sampling happens, and then you earn or you generate credits that are quantified and verified by our third-party body, Sustain Cert, and then the credits are verified and sold to a buyer in the Eco Harvest Market Program. And of course, producer gets paid once the credits are sold. All right. I'm gonna pause here. I'm seeing a couple, it seems like, Aaron, you have a question in the chat. Is this program specifically available outside of the US, specifically in Canada? So we do some work in, I believe, I would have to get back to you with the exact regions in Canada, but we do projects. We have a project with General Mills right now in Canada. I think it's in, I'm not going to misquote, but I'm going to look that up, and I can get back to you with a response to that. But I want to pause here and see if anyone wanted to drop any questions in the chat for on anything that I've presented thus far. And thank you, Christine, for dropping those general audience questions also as well in the chat. What does it cost for the third-party review? That is not a cost that is incurred by producers, Larry, if that's what you're asking. There's no cost, there's no pass-through cost to the producer in the third-party verification process. Linda, some producers waiting to see $30 per ton. That's a great insight. Thank you so much, Linda. I guess really to expound on that, are you saying that really it's $30 per ton, the amount that producers feel is the minimum that makes sense. I guess that's kind of what you're getting at, but I just want to make sure. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Great to know. Thank you for that information. Laura, are there ways for producers who are already engaged in best practices to benefit? Yeah. So we call those types of producers middle adopters, folks who really don't have the ability to or access to fields or acreage that where we can prove additionality. But there are roles in certain project developments that we're working on right now where we can engage middle adopters almost as elder statesmen who or subject matter experts who can engage with producers who are looking to do it for the first time and share knowledge and learnings from their history in doing those practices. So yes, there are project level opportunities, but as far as enrolling in Eco Harvest, unfortunately, no at this time. And then Aaron, are the buyers holding the credits to trade when the price is up, or are they retiring them? Holding the credits to trade when the price is up. If you could clarify what you mean by that, I'd appreciate. And then $80 per ton is another, I guess that's the holdout payment level that for you, Reba, that we required for you to engage or enroll. Okay, well, we got 10 more minutes. I am gonna keep it rolling onto these final few slides here. All right, so as I mentioned, my role here at ESMC is it's a dual role. I lead our membership engagement, but then I also lead our inclusion and racial justice efforts, hence the equity manager of equity in my title. So a lot of the work that I do is it happens in the form of our inclusion and racial justice working group meeting, of which Bryan is a very active member in. And by way of that work over the past 8 months, we have discovered a number of challenges that underserved producers tend to face. Let's see here. All right, so first, how we define underserved producers. We decided to align our definition of historically underserved producers to that of the USDA. And below here are the 4 kind of buckets or demographics that qualify as underserved: socially disadvantaged, Native Americans, Asians, Black and Hispanic producers, veterans, those who have served in the military, beginning farmers, anyone with 0 to 10 consecutive years of farm or ranch operation, and then limited resource farmers rounded out, folks who have farm sales less than the current index value in each of the previous 2 years. All right, and this is a roundup of those common challenges that we've come across in my work leading ESMC's inclusion and racial justice commitment. And the big 3 right now are land security and access in underserved producer communities. We're seeing a number of heirs property issues, which also refers to insecure land titles. A lot of producers are farming on acreage that has over certain amounts of generations been transferred from generation to generation, but paperwork has been lost around the deed or the title of the land. Sometimes there's land theft that occurs unbeknownst to the producer family or the current generation. So we refer to those kinds of issues as heirs property issues, and then also just land tenure challenges. Farmland costs of leases and things like that tend to increase and get higher over time. That's a top of mind kind of concern for a lot of underserved producers, being that obviously without land security and access, you not only face an existential crisis in your farm business, but also it prohibits your ability to interface and access USDA program opportunities, which are critical for most farmers. Education and informational gaps. We have observed a lack of awareness and knowledge, general knowledge on ecosystem service market opportunities. What are ecosystem service markets? What are practice changes that can qualify a producer for enrolling or potentially earning this revenue from producing outcomes? So a lot of, again, a big focus of ESMCs in 2024 is helping to close this gap with developing different content and different program and project opportunities that focus on just educating and engaging with producers on the ground. And then finally, ineffective outreach strategies. Again, this is a nod to the number of producer-facing organizations that are on the call today. Our approach at ESMC has been to work or attempt to work through a lot of the producer-facing organizations who serve those historically underserved producer communities. Folks like the National Black Farmers Association, Intertribal Ag Council, folks who have equity and trust in relationships with these underserved producer communities. And we look to partner with these types of organizations. So for anyone on the call who may be interested in exploring project development opportunities where we hire you or we onboard you as a producer outreach partner or something to that effect, love to hear from you if you're interested in that. But we find that that really is a blocker in meaningful engagement with underserved producers today. And I do want to just wrap this up by saying that we are actively developing project-based solutions to answer to all of these main issues. For example, Bryan from National Indian Carbon Coalition and myself are putting together a proposal for an outreach specialist who will focus on tribal nations and engaging producers in tribal nations with going out on making farm visits, educating them on opportunities in ecosystem service markets, facilitating technical assistance and enrollment in market programs. So these are just some of the types of solutions that we're actively trying to steward and push forward on. And yeah, these are all just top of mind. I do want to take a pause here and ask in the chat if anyone else has any more common challenges that you want to note that face underserved producer communities. Would love to hear from you. Let's see, Aaron, can you tell us about the buyers of water and biodiversity outcomes? What is the unit of sale? What are the going to make? Okay. So Aaron, to quickly answer your question, a lot of our large corporates are interested in water and biodiversity outcomes. As far as water, we're seeing interest from, a lot of the big food CPG companies, as well as also some CPG companies in like the home goods space. But biodiversity is still emerging as far as the metrics and accounting framework. So biodiversity is a much longer term play towards full adoption or widespread adoption. The unit of sale and what are the going rates? I am not 100% sure. I can get back to you on that. But if you drop your email in the chat, I can have someone confirm the exact units of sale for water. But again, biodiversity is still being developed. Christine, what would make it easier for you to engage in ecosystem service market programs? Oh, that was from the next slide. Thank you. My own question. And this is a broad one. This goes beyond just underserved producer communities. We'd like to hear from that perspective as well. But in general, what would make it easier for you to engage with a program like EcoHarvest? Reducing the workload on producers. So smaller producers can access. Yes. Duly noted, Leah. Okay, I know you guys gave me a lot of great engagement today. I am going to end with the final slide with my contact information. I encourage everyone, please get in touch. Ask me any targeted questions. I think I need to get back to Aaron. Your question here, I'm putting that in my notes right now. If you wanted to direct message me your email address, I'm happy to get back to you with an answer to that question. Or feel free to email me, whichever works better.
And we actually have time. Awesome job, Doug and Bryan. Thank you so much. And we have time now just for questions. And since we've saved ourselves some time here, if folks actually want to come off camera to ask some of these questions, like Aaron, if you want to follow up now and ask your speculation question or other questions, or you can just say, I'd rather do it in the chat. That's totally fine. But since we've saved some time, I thought it'd be fun to see a couple faces out there.
Yes. Aaron, thank you for your engagement. Really appreciate these questions that you are sending through. To answer your last question on can jointly owned or communally owned land stewards take advantage of the program? Absolutely, 100%. We're open to working with co-ops and things like that. So yes, 100%, yes.
Aaron, yeah, go ahead. Unmute.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for today's program. Really appreciate it. So up here, a couple of questions. Up here in Canada, First Nations land, Indian reserves, terribly named, are actually owned by the Crown. And so curious if you've ever engaged with that for bringing value to people there.
We haven't, not to my knowledge. However, I will say this too, that what governs what regions we operate programs in, it tends to be buyer needs. So meaning if we're working with General Mills and General Mills has a supply shed of corn in, let's say the Northern Great Plains, for example, we'll then, aim to enroll producers in that region because they're in a position to meet General Mills supply chain needs. So I just use Northern Great Plains as an example. However, I do know that we have executed programs and projects in Canada. I do need to get back to you on the exact regions, but yes, so that's how that works.
And
And just to follow, sorry.
And I was just going to follow up. We are engaging with First Nations on forest-based projects, trying to overcome many of those issues on the Crown-owned land, and we are starting to see solutions, which I believe that we would be able to emulate in the agricultural field. So that's part of again, we're all learning this on our end as we are moving forward because there is such a strong interest in agricultural development for carbon projects, but it is going to take some time to figure out all the nuances specifically for Indigenous lands in North America.
Aaron, did you have another question you wanted to ask?
I do. Just want to make sure if I can't see if there's any other people asking, so just make sure you shut me up if other people are there. In the program, does the farmer have the opportunity to hold the carbon credit to themselves become the speculator to sell it when the price is advantageous for them, or with the contract, must they sell it at that agreed upon price at the time of creation?
Okay. Yeah, I understand your question now. I would need to double check. I'm pretty sure that it's an agreed upon price. And to answer your question, that the answer is no, you cannot hold it, but I would need to double check.
Yeah, that's what we've seen with other programs similar to ESMC, is that the producer would essentially via the contract be guaranteed an X percentage of the project. So just for example, say 75% is going to go to the producer, and then 25 is going to go to an organization that's going to help with the sale of the credits and the design of the project itself, because there's going to be a lot of upfront legwork. And I think there was a question about those third-party expenses. There are going to be no costs going to the producer, the boots on their ground producer that's doing the work. The programs are designed so that you're just generating the revenue, where those other partners are going to take some off the top. So you're not paying anything, you're only receiving, and those percentages are going to basically be set by the program itself and the developer that you're going to work with. We try at the National Decarbon Coalition, obviously, to get the majority of the revenue back into the tribal nation or tribal producers' hands as we can, but there are overhead costs that you have to ensure are being covered. And then every third party is going to take a little bit of a cut for their time and effort. But what we have seen is that these are starting to show to be successful for the producers that we've engaged with. We have a handful at the Blackfeet Nation in Montana, as well as with the Wakiboy tribe in Montana, and then a couple individual producers down in Oklahoma on their own lands.
Thanks, Brian. Larry, I don't know if you're still in the room, but I saw you had a question in the chat. Would you like to come off camera? I'd just like to start inviting folks into the room since we have some space for that. And if not, that is totally fine.
Okay, I have a response on the regions in Canada that we have operated projects in. Those regions are Manitoba, Quebec, and Saskatchewan. So those are the regions in Canada that we have had projects in. I think it was Aaron who asked about that, if I'm not mistaken.
And Larry, since I haven't seen you yet, I'll just ask the question that was in the chat. Are you finding ways to co-op for small producers? I'm imagining by co-op, you mean like cooperation to bring together small producers. Larry, if I'm misreading that, definitely let me know. So Brian and Doug, are you seeing ways that small producers are coming together?
Yeah, I would say, that's one of the things that we're trying to work on. As I've just mentioned, we have a handful of individual tribal member producers in the Blackfeet Nation. So like 6 of them, they've come together to enroll in these programs that we're just piloting right now. Assuming that we can show that they are economically viable for the producers and that they're benefiting from the carbon market program itself and the practices that are being placed on there. And we want to expand this. We feel that we're trending in that direction. We don't 100% know yet. We have another year on that grant, but that's where we've been engaging with Doug and his team, as Doug had mentioned, to try to find basically a soil carbon liaison to help get this information and educate producers as to what these projects all entail. So our hope is that after we do these original pilots, we'll have more data to be able to share that these are viable projects on your land base, regardless of how big they are. I mean, we can go as small as a community garden, an acre or two to enroll in a program, to if you have a couple 100,000 acres of grazing lands, depending upon what your land base is and what type of practices you're interested in implementing on that land base.
Oh, Margaret, your sound's a little wonky. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Margaret?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is following, I think, Aaron's question about biodiversity credits, but are there other groups who are working on developing that biodiversity credit world?
Yeah, I believe that they all are. Most of the carbon market, like leading programs are, they have some level of initiative, but as a whole, there is, where things stand right now, is there is an overwhelming interest from the corporate side in investing in biodiversity outcomes, but it's just very complex to model measurement and metrics around it. Like there's evidence of different species is one thing that's being kicked around, or different species, plural. But yeah, it's going to be a very tough thing to measure and model. And, for as far as corporates who will be purchasing those outcomes, that has to all be in place. The accounting framework must be in place before it really can, be adopted. So That's where things stand right now.
Yep, and I'll agree with Doug on that. It's a heavy lift on our end. We at the National Decarbon Coalition to develop a tracking tool, but what we can only see is tribal lands in the exterior boundaries. So once we see the land bases within the exterior boundaries of the reservation, we have no idea internally how much of that is actually tribal owned or individually tribal member owned, because that data is owned by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the federal government does not like to share that information with anybody else. So we have to engage directly with the tribes or those producers to get that specific data. And then once we get the outline of their land base, then we have to stack on top that data collection for those specific things that we have to look for to adhere to the biodiversity credits. There is a strong interest, as Doug mentioned, by the corp buyers right now. Most of them that we are seeing are almost mandating that you start tracking those co-benefits so that they can show that the dollars that they are expending on the carbon credit is also benefiting that land base in other factors, in soil, water, air quality type of thing. But it's going to take a lot of time to get tools created that can efficiently and cheaply track this data, and then engage once again with producers to have them collect the data. Because right now what we're seeing, like Intertribal Agriculture Council is working with some of their producers. How are they going to collect that data? Is it going to be from a tablet you're carrying with you? Is there going to be an app on the phone? But the producers themselves are the ones inputting the data. So there's going to be a lot of work on everybody's end. The hope is that then increases the value of those credits. That's what we're starting to hear from the corporate buyers, that they're willing to pay more to make it worthwhile to implement that additional workload on the producers on that land base, as we are again installing these sustainable management practices and then showing how they are benefiting through the soil, air, water quality factors. We built into our tool a cultural and a social economical factor that, again, we have to have the tribe or the producer themselves help track that data. So it's coming, it's trending in that direction. It'll be a little bit of time because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that capacity yet.
I imagine it would be a pretty challenging data collection, or it could get really complicated really quickly.
Especially dependent upon what that landowner wants, so like we're working with some tribes in northern Minnesota and they want to track all of this data, and it's like, hey, that's great, but is it going to be viable? Do you have enough staff to track what you want to track? And a lot of times it's culturally significant flora and fauna that they want to see if it's still within their reservation lands, or if it's being depleted, or if it's coming back strong. But you got to have the boots on the ground to be able to do that, and that's going to again fall upon the staff of the tribe that we're working with.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Margaret, anyone else out there want to hop on camera and ask a question or share a reflection? And thanks everyone for sharing these resources in the chat. It's really nice to collect those resources. I'll take 2 more deep breaths, and then if there's nothing, we're gonna start wrapping up.
We skipped our break. We went right through everything.
Our break, we get it at the very end. All right. Thank you so much, Doug and Bryan, and thanks everyone for your engagement. What a great conversation. So we'd love to have everyone please complete this survey that I'm going to share in the chat. It's whether you've been to like one of these or all 4 of these. We'd just like to know how it was for you, what you got out of it, what you hope to see more of in the future. It's super helpful if you complete that survey. And it's just been a pleasure to have these amazing speakers today and in previous webinars, and to work with Christine on this, and to have all of you who are coming with really, really great questions and reflections, and making, I think, hopefully carbon markets better for the future, and actually more workable and usable for more producers everywhere. So I hope that you all got a lot out of this. Again, thanks so much, Doug and Bryan. And Doug and Bryan, if you want to drop your emails in the chat one last time so folks can grab those. So if they have any follow-up questions, they can contact you. And then also, Christine and I can share our emails in the chat too, if you want to contact us with any follow-up. And we hope you have a beautiful day and you stay in touch with us. Christine, is there anything I'm missing before we sign off?
I just wanted to add that I'll be following up with all the registrants, a recording of all 4 webinars. And also I've been working on compiling an annotated bibliography and also resources page of all of the information that was shared from all of our presenters over the last 4 weeks. And I'm really excited to share that with everyone. And please let me know if there's any other resources that you see could be really beneficial. Just go ahead and reach out to my email. But thank you so much to everybody that came to this 4-part webinar series. And thank you, Bryan and Doug, so much for presenting today and sharing all of your knowledge and resources.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.